When we're talking about breaking bad news, it's generally defined as any news which significantly changes an individual's perspective on their future.
Breaking bad news is very difficult and is not just about a diagnosis. It might be about a change in treatment. It might be about the fact that they're being moved to another ward. How a patient or person rates that news may be different to the way that we might see that for ourselves.
March 2008, I went to the doctors because I was feeling low, had a blood test, and that was when I was told there was a protein problem in my blood, and it was paraprotein. Turned out that I had to be referred to the haematology department. So then I began to get my suspicions, oh, what's this? It's getting more serious. And I was beginning to get a little bit scared, I suppose. I did actually say to Dr. Dodd, have I to worry if I start to lose a lot of weight and get more tired? And he just simply said, I don't know. And I really think at that stage when you're really concerned about your health, what you've got, I think a little bit more information of the possibilities that you may have this, you may have that, a little bit more could be explained.
I think it's really important for healthcare professionals to have as much information as possible. Try and find out what the patient actually already knows or understands themselves, because that gives you an insight into their perception.
I was seen by Dr. Salam, and she explained that I actually had myeloma. You kind of go numb. You really, really go numb, and you think, oh my God, I've got cancer. How am I going to tell my children? It's still, oh, I won't see my grandchildren grow up, and it is a shock, and you feel absolutely numb, and therefore you start not to hear anything. If they could ask you to come back in a couple of days' time, when you've got used to digesting that news and you're back in your home, just for someone to call you in and say, right, this is what's happened, now perhaps we can explain and you can take it in more. And I think that would be really helpful.
I work on the critical care outreach team. Prior to that, I worked in the critical care unit, and it was a regular daily occurrence. You had to break bad news. 5 years ago, I was involved with a relative that was dying in a critical care unit, and I sat at the side of the bed and I was on the receiving end of that bad news. It was a very, very different picture. The one thing I would say is I can remember every single word that those people spoke to me in the last 24 hours. The member of the medical staff was a member of junior medical staff, and I did feel so sorry for him. He looked at the floor while he was talking to us. He shuffled around. I did feel as if we were possibly holding up his shift. I would have appreciated more information and in a more confident manner.
The most important thing about breaking bad news is to be aware of yourself in terms of how you appear to that other person and in terms of how you feel. This is incredibly difficult, and it's incredibly painful, and it's messy, and it requires us to give of ourselves, and that's the difficult bit.
I do remember very, very clearly walking away from the bed and walking down a corridor, and a lot of the staff would avoid eye contact because we were obviously distressed. I have seen many patients since distressed walking along the corridors, and the one thing I would never do now is to ever turn away and avoid eye contact. I would always approach them and say, are you okay? Can I help? I'll walk with you. We will go somewhere together. I think the one important thing is not to avoid uncomfortable situations, is to face them head on.
Basically, I started to get bad swelling of my ankles, which were unbearable. Sometimes I couldn't even get my shoes on. Went for various tests and everything, and that was Dr. Dowse. And I actually asked him myself before he said anything to me. I said, that is cancer, innit? He explained to me what it was and everything, and what strain of cancer I'd got, and turned around and told me that it was on both lungs and obviously couldn't operate. But very discreet. I could ask him anything, like even down to treatment, down to everything. He put it over in such a way, as such a pleasant way.
Obviously, what you want to do is to be able to elicit as many responses as possible to understand what the person's thinking and feeling, so open-ended questions are very useful. Often we're quite good at talking about the technical aspects of cancer, but it's important to focus on the feelings, to talk about the fact that people will feel upset and messy for many weeks and months.
The news is usually broken by a doctor, and I think it's really important that nurses are involved, that they're there to support, but also to hear what information has been given so that they're aware what the patient has been told, because patients can also distort what's been said because they're trying to make sense of it.
When they diagnose and they tell you, you're not just swept under the carpet. You're not just left with like, oh, you've got cancer, blah, 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 we'll see you in a month's time. I found it quite relaxing and sort of easing, really. They will stay with you. So I was quite relieved on that matter. Well, say quite relieved, I'm very relieved on that matter. Very, very helpful.
The one thing that I have learnt is to tell people that after you've been given the bad news, that period of time is really special. Your relative is dying, but that next 12 hours is the hardest 12 hours of your life, but it's the most special 12 hours of your life as well.